Hello everybody, Warfloat here, and today I'm going to be talking about how to organize your defense team for this week's raid tournament. So there are three very important things as always to consider. First of all, which rarity of heroes are allowed. Second, which of the three special raid tournament rules are in effect. And third, and in my opinion probably the most important thing, which, if any, color is not allowed. The color of heroes allowed in each raid tournament is much more of a limitation on attackers than defenders. Since this week attackers aren't allowed to bring red heroes, I want to make sure I have as many green heroes as possible on my defensive team so that they can't get countered. This week I've decided to bring 4 green heroes, only making an exception for Malia. What you can do of course is limited for your roster and the other rules that apply to the raid tournament. I personally find Buff Booster at the 3-star level to be a not very interesting variation on the rules, simply because there aren't many 3-star heroes with buffs. From the classic set, there are only 4 heroes: Gunnar, Kelani, Friar Tuck, and Brienne. And Atlantis added a few extra fun ones: Gato, Namahaj with his self-buff, Malia, and Buddy. But overall, you just don't have as many different heroes to play with as you would at the 4 or the 5-star level. Given that green heroes are probably going to be the best this week, I think that Brienne is the best tank you can possibly find. Not only does she have a very solid buff that applies to all her allies for 5 turns, but also her stat line is well weighted towards defense. She's got a solid amount of defense and HP, which is as good as you're going to get with 3 stars for keeping your tank alive long enough to cast and get the attack buff plus the additional 20% from the buff booster rule onto all your allies. While I don't usually like Friar Tuck as a hero, I think he's actually the second best tank this week. He shares a lot of the same properties as Brienne, being average mana, being fairly tanky, and having a buff. But the problem I see with him is that his buff is only for nearby allies and only lasts 3 turns. I also don't think that extra mana generation with 3 stars is really as impactful as getting a large attack buff. His healing ability is of course really nice to keep your lineup alive, but as you'll see in a moment, I have Buddy to do that for me. Buddy is one of the newest heroes to the game, but I had a huge amount of fun playing around with him in beta, and immediately leveled him up when I got him in my regular account. He has a really interesting ability, which is a buff, so gives all your allies 20% attack as well. He's fast mana, and once any of your heroes dies within 4 turns, they're revived with 2/3 of their original health, so a fairly significant portion, and a substantial increase to their attack. They're of course quite squishy at this point. It says they've got decreased defense, so the second version of the hero will die off quite quickly, but they can really pack a punch, which synergizes very well with the attack buff that we're getting from Brienne and from the buff booster tournament. Buddy is one of the newest heroes to the game, but I had a huge amount of fun playing around with him in beta, and immediately leveled him up when I got him in my regular account. He has a really interesting ability, which is a buff, so gives all your allies 20% attack as well. He's fast mana, and once any of your heroes dies within 4 turns, they're revived with 2/3 of their original health, so a fairly significant portion, and a substantial increase to their attack. They're of course quite squishy at this point. It says they've got decreased defense, so the second version of the hero will die off quite quickly, but they can really pack a punch, which synergizes very well with the attack buff that we're getting from Brienne and from the buff booster. I briefly considered having Muggy as my tank because his ability is so cool and so powerful, but his stat line just really doesn't give him any chance of surviving. He is by far the least defensive 3-star. He dies to a strong gust of wind, so I decided that he had to be on one of the flanking positions next to Brienne. Nevertheless, I'm hoping that this tournament he will act as a really strong healer because it gives every ally the chance of reviving when they are killed with 60% HP, which is far larger than any other heals at the 3-star level. Even without Muggy, I still believe that Brienne is a better tank than Friar Tuck. However, if you don't have him, I might consider putting in Beleth as a green healer as well to provide some extra longevity to your team. Now, in order to take advantage of the attack buff that you're going to get from the tournament special, it's still a good idea to include some single-target snipers or some other high-damage dealers, even if they don't have any buffs of their own. For this reason, I have Hassan and Mnessus as my 2 corners, simply because they do a lot of damage and are well statted to come close to killing somebody, especially if they have a 20 to 40, even a 60% attack buff on them. They can very likely one-shot a member of the enemy team. Mnessus has some additional use during the buff booster event, simply because he has this dispels buff from all enemies text, which is quite important because your opponent who's attacking you is going to be bringing people with buffs, and having somebody that can clear them is going to remove a lot of power from the attacking team. Hassan, on the other hand, I just always love as a single target sniper. He just has one of the highest attack stats in the game for a 3-star. He packs a huge punch and will come very close to killing a single target with just his initial hit, and then has the damage over time to finish them off. Beyond that, he prevents them from healing, and so it's very likely that the target he picks is going to die, which is exactly what you want out of a corner sniper. So the last person I haven't talked about on my team is Malia, and she was probably the hardest decision for me to make, simply because she's not a green hero. For a while I had Carver on my defense, who is a very nice defensive hero, plays kind of like Li Zhu or Guinevere, just at the 3-star level, reducing mana to all enemies, and is very effective at stopping the offensive potential of the person attacking you. But I feel like Malia's buff just really makes the cut for this particular event. Getting 36% crit chance on all allies, on a fast mana ability as well, that will compound with the additional attack that everybody gets from the buff booster, and will give a lot more damage potential to the slash attacks of your defensive team. I think that Malia's strong ability and synergy with my team outweighs the fact that she creates a vulnerability towards a purple stack. Of course, she takes double damage from purple tiles, so my opponents will be tempted to bring lots of purples against her. But for the buff booster tournament, 3-star purples are not good at all. There are 7 purple heroes: Balthazar, Oberon, Priska, Renfeld, Tyrum, Chokin, and Gil-Ra, and none of them have any sorts of buff for their teams. Therefore, if somebody wants to bring a purple stack against me, they're not going to be getting any additional advantage from the buff booster tournament rules. I contemplated bringing some powerful blue and purple heroes, but they have the problem of creating a real vulnerability in the lineup. So with a purple hero, such as if I substituted Hassan for Balthazar, that would allow my attackers to bring yellow. And as I already talked about with Malia, there are multiple good heroes, Malia and Kelani, who have strong buffs and could be part of a purple stack. So adding Balthazar to my team would make it weaker overall to the potential of a yellow stack. Similarly, if I put in Gato, who is often a very strong hero because of his high single target damage and immunity to status ailments, this opens me up to a green stack, and as you can tell from the fact that I've made my entire defensive team around green heroes with buffs, giving my opponent the opportunity to stack green heroes of their own isn't worth the risk of even putting in a good hero by his own merit. So that's why I've put in 4 green heroes and only made the exception for a yellow hero in Malia. Overall, when designing your defensive team, it's really important to think about what opportunities you're leaving open to the person attacking you. Since there are no red heroes available, putting as many greens as you can in your lineup is always a great idea, even if those greens don't take advantage of the buff booster. Likewise, when you're bringing any heroes other than green for this raid tournament, it's important to think about what heroes you're letting your opponent use in a color stack against that. It's always a balancing act of picking which heroes you can put on your team which have the best buffs, versus limiting your opponent from taking their heroes which have good buffs. I hope this video was helpful to all of you as you put together your defensive teams for this raid tournament. Over the next few days, I will be recording all of my offensive hits and trying to give some commentary about why I picked those teams and how I generally conduct offensive hits during raid tournaments. My current plan is to take all my hits over the next 5 days and compile those into a single video showing my overall strategy for this raid tournament. However, I realized that wouldn't be very helpful for people taking hits during the tournament, so I was considering just making one video for my 5 hits tomorrow and releasing that to give some guidance to you guys for the week going forward. If you think that would be helpful, let me know in the comments down below, and as always, it's greatly appreciated if you like and subscribe, and best of luck to everybody throughout this entire raid tournament.